Welcome to the Boardroom Sessions podcast with your host, Mike Miller. In these sessions, we get to meet up close and personal with the best and the brightest technology leaders and executives in Southern California. We learn about their backgrounds, their business models, and their challenges. We learn about their goals and what makes them tick. Hope you enjoy. What a session this is. In this Boardroom Sessions podcast, we meet Rob Shanahan, 30 years music photographer to the stars. And when I mean stars, I mean Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, Keith Richards, Lady Gaga, Sting, Barry Manilow, Avril Lavigne, Slash, Van Halen, to name a handful of a 30-year run that he has had so far in photography. What a great guy Rob is. I know you're going to love this one. We talk about 30 years of working with A-listers. We talk about his history, mastering the craft of photography. We talk about business models like books, keynote speaking engagements, and social media, and more. Enjoy. Rob Shanahan, thanks for coming to the Boardroom Sessions podcast today.
You bet.
Glad to have you here. So Rob Shanahan, you're a rock photographer, and you have an opportunity to work with people like Ringo Starr, people like, I don't know, why don't you name drop a few folks that are in this book here in front of you?
So many.
Yeah.
Well, when you say rock photographer, that's kind of...
music photographer, I
would
say.
There you go. Because, I got Barry Manilow in my book, and I wouldn't consider him a big rock star, but great, iconic American musician, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what a great guy. What a great thrill to meet and work with him. So we really don't go with that label, rock photographer. That's something the media kind of threw on me, but probably because of the way I look. But I guess I would be more classified as a music photographer.
Okay.
Because not only do I shoot great rock stars, like you mentioned, Ringo, Charlie Watts, Keith Richards, Aerosmith, all the big names, but I also shoot a lot of jazz guys, a lot of classical guys.
Right.
So,
we were just talking last week, and you were in New York at Juilliard.
Yes, shooting the percussionist Pablo Riete, which is the lead percussionist in the New York Symphony Ballet. I mean, It's such an honor to shoot guys that have made it to that level of their craft. And it was just amazing. So we shot at Juilliard in the dance studio. They gave us the dance studio to shoot in. And before we loaded in, there was an actual class going on, a ballet class, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds. I couldn't tell the age, but really young, kids at Juilliard studying ballet. And I was watching, just amazed at how gorgeous and beautiful and talented and awe-inspiring these kids were. They may have been younger, now that I think about it, because I do know that Juilliard also has like a high school program where the high schoolers come in and do extra credit.
But it's acceptance only, and it's exclusive and extremely hard to get into.
Let me tell you how exclusive. I found out their acceptance rate every year, less than 5%.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's real exclusive, really hard to get into Juilliard. And let me tell you, if you're at Juilliard and studying and have been accepted, you're the cream of the crop in the art world. So imagine seeing 25, 30 ballet dancers in that studio. They were going through routines and practicing, and it was just awe-inspiring.
That's amazing.
Really
and you're doing work there. You're taking photos.
Yeah, shooting the percussionist.
Awesome. And so that's just a day in the life of Rob. So you're a pretty busy guy. Sitting here looking at your volume 1 book in front of me. You're working on volume 2 as we speak right now.
Yep.
You have a documentary being filmed, so people are following you around while you're taking photos of other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Been a couple of years on that now, but it's been amazing. I really like it.
I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. And you do speaking engagements. That's how we originally met.
Yeah.
So you're a keynote speaker, and I met you at a CenturyLink. Had you as their keynote speaker in San Diego, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the future here. But you're busy. You're a busy business guy, doing a lot of different things and making a mark for yourself. And I'm looking forward to having the audience here learn a little bit about you. And so why don't you give us a little background here on those were a lot of projects that you're working on, but I can't imagine you started with that in mind, that you would be the guy that you are today? You started you told me as a kid with rock posters on your wall and a 35 millimeter camera.
It's funny. I am exactly who I thought I was going to be. I really do believe that. I think we are destined to become what we really feel like we are if we do follow our dreams and our goals and work hard. And that's what I've done. Since I was a kid, I always knew that I needed to be working in the music industry. And I'm a drummer. I started drumming when I was 10, and I had all the rock posters in my bedroom. And then when I was about 14, my mom bought a camera for my dad for Christmas, and he never figured it out. So I kind of adopted that camera and figured it out, read the manual over and over, and I just started shooting film, and I fell in love with photography. So it really has been something that I've been doing for a long, long time, and I just knew that I had to find a way to make one or both my living, my career. And so off to California.
Came to California where all the rockers are at, where all the music's at.
But being that this is a boardroom discussion, I have to get deep into my history. So after high school, my dad said, if you want to go to college, I'll pay. You just have to stay on the honor roll. So I enrolled in Minnesota State University as a business and accounting major. My senior year, like a quarter before graduation, is when I packed it up and moved. I just knew that if I graduated and got my degree, I would be stuck in Minnesota working at some company, some corporation, and that may not have been so bad either. But I just...
Some of us call that the left turn, right? You can take the right turn, you can take the left turn.
I was at the Yogi Berra point in my life.
Right.
When you come to a Y in the road, take it. Well, I took it. I took the right one, apparently.
That's awesome. So you got in a car, you went to California. What did that look like?
Well, my brother and I have a younger brother. He was 18 at the time, and I was just turned 22. We were both seniors. He was a senior in high school. I was a senior in college. And we both left before graduation. We had a van, and we threw our drums and my photo gear in, and off we went to California.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so what was your first break? Who did you first shoot and get paid for?
Well, when you end up in LA, and by the way, we had probably less than $300 in our pockets.
Typical story, right?
Yeah, forget about finding an apartment or finding a place to stay. Thank God we had each other and the van. So we lived in the van. We go to the supermarket and get a loaf of bread and some bologna and be set for the week. And I'm telling you, it was a real struggle. But I can honestly say I went from being homeless in LA, homeless, living in a van with my brother, but we were kids. It's not like being homeless now.
Sure, I had a Volkswagen Westphalia for years. It's not homeless.
Nah, you're totally set. And we were on Venice Beach going, wow, we're in Los Angeles. This is great. And we were having the best time. And, you eventually find where the musicians hang out. Sunset Boulevard. So every night, Sunset Boulevard, we were hanging out at the Roxy and the Whiskey and Gazzari's, which has been changed ownership a few times. But there was a wall outside Gazzari's where all the rockers would hang out. And we were trying to put together a band. That was my thing. I was trying to put together the next Motley Crue or Van Halen or one of the big, acts to come out of LA. And I met a guitar player who gave me his phone number before anyone had a cell phone. You actually had to write people's phone numbers down on paper. And I threw it in my pocket. And about 2-3 weeks later, it may have been longer. I don't know. This is 30 years ago, so time kind of has a different reference to me. But I remember pulling into a gas station. I had $1 left in my pocket. I put 50 cents of gas in the van and 50 cents in the phone booth. And I called the guitar player. Said, hey, man, remember me? We met out on the Strip a couple weeks ago. And he's like, oh, yeah, you're the drummer. Come on up to my house. I have a house up in Granada Hills. So he gave me the address and how to get up there. So we went up there and ended up staying at his house for a long time, actually, months and months. And started writing music and playing with this guy and pretty much just moving into his house, and his girlfriend was cooking and taking care of us. And it was kind of a weird situation. And I needed to get a job, basically. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So I started walking around the neighborhood and finding out what businesses were close enough to walk to. Thought I would, pick up something local. And I stumbled upon this amazing camera store and photo studio and photo lab called The Dark Room.
Okay.
It's gone now, but at the time, they were like the biggest pro camera, photo lab, etc. in the Valley. And they had huge accounts like Warner Electra and NFL and all these big accounts where all these photographers would come in and dump their film. So I walked in and just, out of the blue, just asked, "Hey, are you guys hiring?" And the girl behind the counter, the manager, said, "As a matter of fact, we are. Come on back." And she asked me, like a handful of photography questions. And I knew the answer. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this, that. What's C41? Oh, yeah, that's the color process."
And that's because you read manuals, right?
That's because I was already into
trained.
photography and I knew all the terms. I knew all the, the black and white and the color film processing. And she said, "Great, can you start tomorrow?" So I started working there.
Right away.
And it was great for me because all of a sudden I'm thrown into this pro situation with all these great lab techs. And I got to learn, really dive in deep into photography. Everyone that worked there was photographers, and we were always comparing photos and talking about cameras and this and that. And I just really started shooting a lot more. And I talked the owner into building a studio within the space. And I started doing headshots in the studio. And this would have been late 80s. So the real estate market in California was booming at the time. And everyone was a real estate agent. So it turns out I was shooting real estate headshots, 8-10 hours a day, just boom.
You can still see them on people's emails, right? Now I still see them around.
They're
Everybody's
old
got a
school
headshot.
headshots. Yeah. And this, you got to understand, this
Bus
is back in the bus benches. Yeah. But this is back in the film day. So you really had to know how to shoot. It's different now in the digital world, and we can talk about that later. But, I was really skilled at shooting in the studio and portraiture, and I got, I honed my skills day in and day out shooting in that studio. And after a couple of years, my phone just kept ringing from, people wanting me to shoot other things out of the studio, like, "Hey, I'm doing this or that," or "I've got this catalog project." And the phone just kind of kept ringing, and I realized that I needed to be working on my own. I've always been kind of a self-employed kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And it was good that I got that job, though. It really got me...
You needed some bread at the time, right?
I needed some bread. I ended up getting my own apartment. My brother and I moved into our own apartment, and my brother ended up working there too as a delivery guy. He was delivering film to Warner Electra and Capitol Records and all the different film and music studios around town. And one of the photographers that would bring film in there all the time ended up becoming one of the mentors that I latched onto. He was shooting pro sports, so I'm seeing him looking at all his NFL photos and Major League Baseball photos. And I used to bug him like crazy. Lewis Rayner is his name. Lewis, if you ever get an extra credential to shoot a football game, I'm there, I'm in.
Oh, awesome.
And after about 5 months of me heckling him, he finally, said, "Okay, I got an extra pass for the Sunday game." It was the Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals at the Coliseum.
Okay.
My first NFL game, and I was hooked. So before that, when I was in Minnesota at Mankato State, Minnesota State, Mankato, the Minnesota Vikings used to have their training camp there. So they would be there in spring and fall, and I would be there with my camera shooting, them on the field. And I really fell in love with shooting, football.
Yeah, athletes in their prime.
Yeah, so when I met this guy, Lewis, and saw his film and we talked about him shooting with the NFL, I just knew that that'd be something I'd like to get into. So I ended up calling the NFL on my own and weaseling my way in and got my own credentials from them. And they started hiring me every Sunday I was shooting in LA. This was back when we had the Rams and the Raiders.
Right.
Then
the Coliseum.
Yeah, and then they both flew out. Rams went to St. Louis,
right.
Raiders back up in Oakland. So every Sunday I was flying somewhere to go shoot a game. They would fly me to Denver or Green Bay or Seattle, wherever.
The NFL was.
NFL.
And so where were the photos being sold to? How are you monetizing this?
Football cards. A lot of football cards.
So there's companies that you would sell your photos to?
Yeah.
Okay. And so was that a trial scenario where you would send them a handful of photos and they either liked it or didn't and put it on a card?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
On spec.
Pretty competitive business?
Competitive, not a whole lot of money, but it was a lot of fun, and it was really good training for me, honing my focusing and my mechanics of photography. Back then it was all manual focus cameras and film, so you really needed to know exposure. But then, interestingly, the NFL started hiring me to shoot portraits of some of their key guys. Like I would go to, like Joe Montana's house and do a portrait of him for the cover of whatever. And I did this one-on-one with these great players like John Elway. I remember him and a few key guys like that.
So you're there with on NFL Business to take photos of Joe Montana at his house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so they're paying you to come do this. So do you get to keep the photos as well?
Well,
or do the photos become their property?
The NFL would have not complete copyright ownership. They would have usage rights, but I would own the copyright.
Oh, okay, great.
So I'd have them. I still have all that stuff in archive.
What an experience.
Yeah, it was cool.
Did you ever get starstruck when you started talking to a guy like Joe Montana or John Elway?
Well, here's what's interesting. Me as a musician and looking the way I do, I look like this forever, it's me dealing with musicians, like me and Steven Tyler.
That's a little different.
Like this,
yeah.
I feel like we're, been separated at birth. We're like two peas in a pod. Right. We're identical. We're like little boys
Kindred
stuck in
spirits.
A man's body. Yeah. Athletes, a little different. And I never really felt that connection, but I could shoot. I knew how to handle them and I knew how to photograph them and make it easy and comfortable and all that. So that was why I was busy doing that. But when I would shoot bands and my musician friends, that felt right to me. That always felt more special, like a connection. So I just kept shooting as many musicians and bands that I could. And, one of the drummers that I used to shoot a lot, I used to go see his band play every Sunday night in Venice at this little dive bar called Venice Bistro. But he was playing in this top 40 band called Pine Mountain Logs. And this drummer, Scott Crago, and I hit it off. And he asked me once, he goes, man, I need a new headshot for this cymbal company that's doing a catalog. They need my photo in the catalog. So I did it. And then Stevie Nicks called. She hired Scott to go out on tour with him, and they needed the photo.
His headshot.
They needed the photo for the tour book. And then the cymbal company called and asked if I would start shooting other drummers for them. And, once they knew I was a drummer and could speak the drummer lingo, it was really what
you're an insider in the crew.
It's what really started it. So the first drummer I shot for them was Sheila E.
Wow.
And then I shot Alex Van Halen, and then Stuart Copeland, and then Paul McCartney's drummer, Abe Laboriel Jr., and, all these big, amazing rock drummers that I used to idolize as a kid. I had their posters in my bedroom, and here I am shooting them.
And so with those guys, were you ever starstruck? Did you get some of them in the room and think, or was it just a connection?
With musicians, it's different.
It's different.
When I'd go to Alex and go like, dude, I grew up studying your drum tracks. How did you do that part and that drum fill on this song? And he's like, oh yeah, this is what I did. And
okay.
It was cool as
hell.
So
they're more like peers.
Yeah.
They're more like
I want to know how they recorded and how they got certain drum sounds. And
is there an element of the fact that they're more down to earth as well? Or did they get become and act like
I
celebrities?
Think if you break down that barrier right away, I think it opens up the conversation. For me, that's how it was. I kind of know what to say right away to kind of break that barrier down. And Maybe it's my self-deprecating humor, or
No,
the way
I think you're a cool guy. I mean,
I
you
think
came
I'm
off.
just my passion about them and their music really came off, and they're like, "Oh, okay, this is going to be actually kind of fun. This guy loves to talk about my work and my drumming." I think that's what it was for
You
them.
got to their level. If we could take a real quick step back, let's
Yeah.
talk about the fact you said you were taking photographs of guys at clubs and of
Yeah.
bands.
Yeah.
There wasn't maybe a direct monetization of those photos at that time. You're just doing something you're passionate about, and then you get that one headshot for the catalog, right? Which turns into Stevie Nicks, which
Yeah.
turns into the cymbal company,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's right.
So you've done things like that on faith before, right?
Yeah.
Where you've gone out on a limb thinking this could be, or this is just fun, and it turns into some business.
I do that now. I still do that. If there's a young artist that I really like and I want to go photograph, I'll do it. Hey,
Yeah.
Could I come shoot your show or whatever? Or if I want to include them in my next book, I'll do that too.
Yeah.
Like, there's some artists that I really want to have in volume 2, and I did that for volume 1 too. Some artists that I really wanted to have in the book, so I just offer my services and make an agreement. If you want to use the photos for anything, feel free, but I want to have them for my book. And that's usually my agreement with all the artists that I work with. I'll always own the copyright, but they have usage rights.
Right. And so you're an artist, so this to you is an art form, right? And so
Yeah.
if you see something that moves you in that, like an artist,
Yeah.
you are fine with going that direction and,
Sure.
and looking for it.
You got to go with your gut.
Yeah.
It's a feeling for me. If it feels good, it feels right, then I'm very trusting in that internal voice. I've always listened and trusted that little boy inside my head. I still have that little boy in my head. My family was just here for our daughter's graduation, and my sisters say, "You're still that same kid from
Yeah.
high school," and I'm glad to hear it. I haven't changed.
That's awesome, and that's not always the case for folks that come out here to LA that get involved in Hollywood and all of that, where you've been experienced and where you do your work. Some people have a tendency to become pretentious and important.
Yeah, that just doesn't work.
And that brings me back to how you and I first met.
Yeah.
So I have to be candid here and tell you that I came to an event. It was one of many, many events that we all do in my industry. We
Yeah.
come to these conventions and shows, and there's always a keynote, and it's
Yeah.
usually some pro football player, quarterback like Roger Staubach, or
Right.
a baseball player who was a pitcher forever, or some guy selling a business book, right?
Right.
And here's Rob Shanahan, and I had no idea what or who or any background or anything other than your presence on the stage.
Okay.
And you came up on the stage.
That's good.
And you walked up to
You
the
had
folks.
no preconceived idea. You
I don't
didn't know.
think anybody did,
You
honestly.
came in cold, like, okay, who's this guy? What am I
Exactly.
going to get?
And there were a lot of people in the stands. I
Yeah,
think.
there was close to 1,000, right?
Yeah. There was a lot of people, and you were billed as the keynote, and we were all in that room for that period of time. And you came off immediately as this very humble, genuine guy.
That's good.
And you took a photo that was behind you, and you told a story about the situation behind that photo and the individual that you met.
Yes.
So that was captivating. I watched the audience because I was standing room only, and so I was on the back wall.
Wow.
And I was looking at all the people. And usually in this kind of crowd, people are on their phone, they're multitasking, they're talking, something of that nature. No one was doing anything but listening to your story.
Oh, I love it.
And so I believe in the value of storytelling.
Yeah.
And I weave it into my professional world all day long.
Yeah.
I think that people are psychologically conditioned to hear a story very well.
Mm-hmm.
We tell our kids stories. We read stories.
Right.
We listen to stories.
We love movies.
We love movies. We love a story. And so tell us about the speaking engagements that you do and how you go into preparing for these, because it was captivating and it was amazing. And when I met you afterwards, you were the same guy and you weren't trying to be somebody different up there. And so
I
tell
can't
us
be
about
anyone but myself. Tommy Lee said it best once. He said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is taken." How about that?
That's a great
That's
one.
perfect. I know. It's on the bottom of his email. That's like his little quote, his sign off. And when I first read that, I'm like, yeah, that's it. You have to be who you are. That's all it is. And if I'm on stage talking about how great I am because I'm on, tour with Ringo, that's not going to fly. I'm not Ringo. I'm just his photographer, but I'm the guy that gets to do that. And I find it to be exciting to share my journey. And that's what it's all about. Here's what I did. It was so much fun. And now I get to share all these great photos with you. And look at, here I am on stage with Van Halen. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
How exciting.
People were cheering when you would flip to another photo and they would see like they would get their icon, right? And then you have such a varied background of people that you've done work with that you could tell different groups were getting into different things, and you mixed it up really well. So
that's it. I get to shoot like last week. Well, Monday night, let's back up before Juilliard, before New York. Monday night, I was at the Forum with Shakira.
Wow.
Yeah, really great Latin pop star, and her drummer is a dear friend of mine. I've known him for over 10 years, Brendan Buckley. So I was there at Soundcheck and did some great photos of them and the band. And then the show, my wife and I, she was with me, and she was just, my wife, she loves to dance. And that was fun for her to come and watch Shakira. It was a great show, really fun. The next day I'm flying out to New York to go to Juilliard. And interestingly, I landed at like 6:00. And that night, a friend of mine was playing at the Iridium on Broadway.
Okay.
And I let him know, dude, I'm flying in. I'm coming to your show. And he's like, awesome. And this guy, his name is Liberty DeVito, Billy Joel's original drummer. He drummed with Billy for 30 years. He's played on, his name is credited on over 150 million records sold. I just looked that up on Wikipedia because I put it in a blog post this morning. And he's played on every one of those great Billy Joel hits from the 70s and 80s and 90s that we all love.
Right, yeah.
He's a dear friend of mine. He's got a new band called the Slim Kings. So I went to see him play. I got there just in time for the show. My flight was late and, getting into New York from JFK, I'm like sweating it out. But no, I wasn't sweating it out. I figured I'd get there when I got there.
Right.
So I got there, just in time to see the show and see him after. And then the next day I'm at Juilliard. So it was a nice week.
Yeah.
Shakira, Liberty, and then Juilliard.
What a life.
Yeah.
What a life. You get to hang out in the places that you always wanted to hang out and weave in work and dear friends. You've used that term a few times. So you're definitely connected in the industry.
Well, being in business, it's all about relationships. And, in the music industry and the entertainment industry that I'm in, it's even more so because we feel like we're kindred spirits and have this deep love of music and art and what we do. And the bonds are really strong. Like I can go 5 years without seeing a friend. And then, he's on tour. I happen to be in a city where he's in. I'm like, I'm here. And we get together and it's like we just saw each other the week before. It's a unique relationship world to live in. Everyone's connected, and even more so now, we can start talking about technology, and now we're all super connected. I've been doing this for over 25 years in the music industry. When it was you carried an address book and you had to use a payphone to get a hold of somebody.
Sure.
Now we're like texting each other.
I try and tell my kids about the life before a cell phone. It's inconceivable for them. They would have no idea. They don't know. And so do you find that things are at a completely different pace? And I know that it is, but for your business and things, it just gets exponential, right?
Oh, yeah.
The opportunity is just unbelievable today, right? Before we lose track, let's go back to the speaking engagement for a minute, right?
Yeah. I'd love to talk about that because I really, really love it. I found out my wife was there. That was like her, when I do these colleges and the photo schools and my workshops, she doesn't go to those, but she was there. And afterwards, she's like, oh my God, you were so great.
Yeah.
And when my wife will say that, because she doesn't give me any props. She's from Brooklyn. She's a New Yorker. She's as tough as they come. In fact, I brought her with me on my Barry Manilow shoot because he's also from Brooklyn. And he said to my wife, he goes, Brooklynites, we have a built-in bullshit meter. I'm like, you nailed it. That's my wife. So she's pretty no nonsense. And after that keynote, she's like, oh my God, you got to do more of those. We got to really focus on you doing those.
You really do. And I think you have an unbelievable way of telling a story and connecting with people. And again, when we had an opportunity to meet, you were the same guy.
That's good.
It was just unbelievable to have that kind of scenario.
That's good.
I meet some people in the business world that they might be big in their company and they still act like they're a big guy,
wow.
you know? And it's just different.
Wow.
So understand that.
So you want to know how that ended up?
Yeah,
how was
exactly.
How did I get hired by an $18 billion company?
Yeah,
and I'll say that again.
Yeah.
CenturyLink, $18 billion company. And here they have this small town Minnesota boy be their keynote speaker. Well, I met John DeLozier, at the time, one of the VPs of CenturyLink. I met him backstage at a concert. He's a good friend of country artist Phil Vassar.
Okay.
And I've been shooting Phil's record covers and stuff for a long, long time, over 10 years. And he was in LA playing, so my wife and I went, and John was backstage. We met there, and we immediately connected, like a long-lost brother. And he's like, man, tell me about Aerosmith, or tell me about Ringo, tell me about, the Stones and this and that. And
naturally, that's what everyone wants to know about.
We'd go for dinners, and then he's calling me at like weird hours. Hey, so tell me again about Van Halen. I would tell him the story because I know he's such a music fan like I am. And I would see him when I'm in Nashville working. I would hook up with him and stay at his house. He would have me come stay there. And, whenever we're together, we're talking about rock and roll and our favorite bands and this and that. And just out of the blue, I happened to be back home in Minnesota. And my wife, Hillary, called and said, you're not going to believe who's in Minnesota right now. John DeLozier. He was at the golf tournament. What's the big Masters Cup or the American Cup or whatever it was?
Okay.
It was in Minnesota.
Like the Ryder Cup or something?
One of those, yeah,
US
big
Open?
golf tournaments.
Okay.
Happened to be at a golf course like 10 miles from my hometown. So I called John. I'm like, you're not going to believe it. I'm in Minnesota. And he's like, dude, come down to the Hyatt tonight. I want you to meet my group. So I did. I went and met like 10 people in this big executive table for dinner. And he's like, all right, Rob, tell everyone about Van Halen. Tell them the story you told me about, Keith Richards. And I was telling them the stories. And it turns out they were all, with CenturyLink. And they were the team that put together the event.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I didn't realize it at the time, but that was kind of like my little audition to get the keynote gig.
And then now it's a complete business model. Now you can go do the corporate gigs and get connected with different companies to do this very thing. Telling stories, weaving in a conversation around working with the masters, right? Yeah. And mastering the craft.
Yeah.
Great messaging, great ability for you, to be able to connect with people, connect the stories. And something you and I spoke about that I think is interesting here is how you weave in the fact that you thought originally the photos themselves, the collection of the photos would be the value in what you were doing in your life, right?
Right.
But really now, through the experience of sharing these stories in these public forum,
right.
It's actually the stories behind the photos, right?
Yeah.
Tell us how you made that epiphany.
Well, every picture that I take, every photo, I feel like it's an asset for me. It's another asset to my growing asset, my bodied work, so to speak. As photographers, that's what we do. We collect a bodied work, and then hopefully when you're ready to retire, you can put a book out or volumes of books that you're hoping the public will want. Well, I found out with my first book that they do want the book. I sold out my first book. I'm very excited.
In volume 1, now you're on volume 2.
It's so exciting. But I realized that the value is not all my images, it's the stories and the experiences behind the images, and to be able to talk about those and to be able to talk about them in front of a big crowd, like 1,000 people. Like my wife asked me, she's like, don't you get nervous in front of a big crowd? And I do for about 3 seconds, 3 minutes, maybe 3 seconds to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then once I get going, in fact, when I first met you in San Diego at that keynote, literally, I'm behind that intro wall. Remember how they introduced me and that wall opened up, that big round, amazing digital screen opened up. It's on my website. People can go and check it out. When that opened up and I walked out, the smoke and the lights, seriously, 5 seconds before that door opened, I'm thinking, all right, what the hell are you going to do? How are you going to start? I didn't even know my first line. I didn't know. I just knew that once I got out there, it would come to me. I didn't know. I kind of have a layout and a kind of a bullet points in my brain of what I want to talk about and touch on. But, you know, that first line, that opening line, you just don't know. So I found out a long time ago, and you know me by now. I mean, we've known each other how long, and you probably can figure out who I am already. I'm a pretty open book.
Yes.
But I found out a long time ago, if I can be self-deprecating, it breaks that barrier down right away.
Sure.
So I remember walking out thinking, I'm a drummer. I'm always in the back of the stage. I never get this. I'm doing it again. Remember that? I walked back and came out again. And I think doing that, people realize, all right, this guy's not taking himself seriously. And then I was joking about my hair because I could see it from the back. Exactly. I think once you break that barrier down and I look out and I can tell by their eyes and their mouths and their faces and their smiles, I can tell I have them.
You did.
And once you have them in your hand, it's just, you know, I know that what I'm about to show them on the big screen is going to blow their mind and to be able to tell the stories behind it. So it's a lot of fun for me. I really dig it. But before that, I was doing, you know, photo schools. The schools would have me come in and talk to the kids.
About your craft.
Yeah, the craft. And I'd talk about exposure and lighting and, you know, post-production. And, you know, I'd get into like, you know, how I used to learn darkroom techniques with the old chemicals and trays. And now you do it in Lightroom. And I apply those techniques to what I'm doing now with the modern technology. And I really enjoy sharing that knowledge with the kids, with the students. And I was doing a lot of them. And whenever I go to New York, B&H, the big camera store there, has a workshop room up on the second floor. And it seats, I think, 75 people. Yeah, 75 people. It's not a huge space, but it's a really cool, iconic space. And for them to call me to come give workshops at their room in New York City, you know,
big honor.
I was floored. And then, you know, when they told me, it's 2 hours and, you know, it's going to be, you know, a good group of kids. I'll have great questions, you know, some intermediate photographers, maybe a couple pros. And I'm like, wait a minute, whoa, 2 hours. How the hell am I going to fill 2 hours? And I'm telling you, the first one I did, you know, I had my bullet points and I had my slideshow ready. It went so fast.
Yeah.
I remember the sound guy in the back of the room with the flashlight. And I was thinking my mic fell off. And I'm like, what? And he's like, and I'm like, what?
He's cutting you off.
He goes, that was it. That's 2 hours. Now let's do a Q&A. And it felt like 15 minutes. It went so fast. It was really, really quick.
So you get an opportunity to work with a lot of masters of their craft, right?
Yeah.
So you put a lot of time and effort into photography, no doubt. So to get where you're at, obviously you have a passion for it too. Yeah. You've gone through the film, and it's probably a good reason why you're so successful today is that you understand the basics and you understand the mastery of the art of photography.
Yeah.
You get the chance to hang out with and use as you know, your craft, the folks, the other masters, the masters of music, the masters at Juilliard in the making, right? The masters of the NFL when you first started. So you get a chance to hang out with all these folks. Talk to me about the A game, like the mastery.
Well, let's talk about this. When you say you go in and you work with these A-list, you know, guys, whether it be an athlete or a musician or whoever. So when I go in, I have to be that A-game guy.
Exactly.
So I have to know my cameras. I have to know my lighting, my gear, everything. And a lot of times I don't get a whole lot of time to go in and prepare. I'll have an assistant and maybe a stylist, hair and makeup or whatever. And we'll get an artist and have like 10 minutes or less, hopefully more. But, you know, I'll be given a room backstage at, like, let's say, I'll give you an example, Staples Center. There's a space there that I shoot there, and they'll bring the artist in who's ever headlining, and they're like, okay, go, you got 5 minutes. It's like, so yeah. I got 5 minutes. I better know my shit. I better know my lighting. And sometimes I go into a situation where I have to set up quick and be ready to go immediately. So, I'm immediately looking around thinking about, okay, that's a good corner. There's a beautiful chair, or a rug or whatever. Let's shoot there, put the light there. And I know my exposures. I know where to set the light. And I'm mentally already visualizing the photo. And you have to have all that. I call it the mechanics of photography, like just ingrained in your brain, like lighting, exposure, shutter speeds, whatever it's going to take to nail that photo. So I'm really quick about that. And I think that's a big part of it,
well,
too.
You have to be good at what you're doing or you wouldn't get the exposure to these people, right?
Yeah, here's an example. So Paul Simon and Sting were on tour, and I've worked with Sting before. I've done stuff with him, never Paul Simon. But those guys kind of see each other like 4 minutes before showtime. Oh, hey, how's it going? They walk on stage and boom, they're on stage, right? Well, as they got together and before they hit the stage, I got them for like 2 minutes. Like, we need a new photo of these two guys. Nothing that they've gotten they were happy with. So when they were in LA, they had me come in and do it. So I set up a room about this size. I had a light, my gear ready to go. They walk in. Oh, hey, how's it going? And Paul Simon walked in. Hey, how's it going? And I got them two together, and I had like 10 seconds to really, position and click, 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 shot like 20 frames, had them do one more thing, and then off they went.
Wow.
4 minutes later, they're gone, and it's a fleeting moment. And if something goes wrong and I'm not prepared, it's gone.
Sure.
And there's no getting it
So
back.
how much of the work, one of the more iconic photos in the book, I think, is the Ringo Paul McCartney picture, right?
Yeah.
And that's a similar scenario where it looks like it was unscripted. It looks like those two were playing with each other, goofing off, and you got a couple of really good shots out of it.
Yeah, that was 2009 when they released the Beatles Rock Band. I was hired to do the promo photos of the two of them together. One of those photos ended up on the cover of USA Today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the A section, not the entertainment section, but the cover, top of the fold. So when it's at the newsstand, it was right there. I love it.
So USA Today pays you for that photo, right?
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah. And then Apple had hired me to do the photo shoot. And originally they brought in a step and repeat. You know what that is? Like one of those canvas with all the logos all over it. They had one of those that they wanted me to shoot against, but I came prepared. I brought a big white backdrop with stands and my studio lights.
The logo slide like they put in front of like movie premieres, that kind of thing? Okay.
Yeah, those are called step and repeats. And it had like the Beatles logo, and it had Apple, and it had
all the
Rock
sponsors.
Band, all the sponsors. Yeah. And, while I'm shooting them in front of that, I kept thinking, it's going to be easy to retouch all that out anyway. I was going to get rid of it because I hate all those logos. But I had another setup. So I had him come over there. And, it goes back to my relationship with Ringo, and I'd worked with Paul before. They trusted me. I'm like, hey, guys, I got another spot. Come around the corner. And I had, we go around the corner. It was actually back in the loading dock. I had a studio set up, so I got those two on there. And
fantastic.
Yeah, it was cool, man. When I looked through the camera and I got the rhythm section of the Beatles in my set, on my, photo background paper ready to go, I'm just like, wow, this is cool.
Yeah.
Paul and Ringo right there.
Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who surprised you the most? Like, which one of the guys that you worked with did you meet and think, your preconceived notion of how you're going to meet this individual, what they were going to be like, and then you met him and you thought something completely different?
I think the first guy that comes to my mind is Steven Tyler. And I'll tell you about meeting him. I was out on tour with Ringo, and I got a call from Aerosmith management. Hey, the guys want you to come out and do some shows. Gave me the dates, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Sorry, I just swore.
That's okay.
I'm like,
the audience forgives you.
I'm out with Ringo. I can't. I'm booked. I can't do it. So I gave him my dates when I'd be done and be available. And when I eventually, got on the road with those guys with Aerosmith, it was in Vegas. That was the first show I did with them at the MGM. And I've been pals with the drummer, Joey Kramer, for a long time.
Wow.
I've been to his house and done a couple photo shoots with him in the past. So he knew my history. He knew all about me. And so I'm hanging with him at soundcheck before Joe and Steven and the band comes out. Just him and I at the drum kit doing some stuff. And then Steven comes out and he was playing Hard to Get with me, kind of like my cat. You know, they look at you and turn away and walk away. And Joey's like, Steven, come on over, meet Rob. And he came over and he looks at me and he goes, fuck you. I'm like, what? What? And he goes, nobody says no to Aerosmith but a Beatle. That's okay. You can say no to us for a Beatle. So.
Oh, you had blown him off.
Because I was out with Ringo.
Oh.
He goes, you can only say no to us if you're out with the Beatle, and you were. So it was just his way of
you went right up the ranks with him now.
Yeah, it was just his way of giving me a little shit and making a joke out of it. So he turned out to be the coolest. I mean, he's cool. He's Steven Tyler.
Yeah.
He's exactly what you see on TV or at a concert. He's that guy 24/7. And, you know, we both realized that we're just two peas in the pod. You know, we're very similar, just young boys trapped in an old man's body. Although I'm not as old as he is. And we just hit it off. And he's like, man, I know your work. I just want you to do your thing. So, you know, the host show, wherever you want to go. If you want to be on stage, come on. I go walking down the center, come on out. Get out on the stage with me. So I did. During the show, I'm all over on stage with Aerosmith. And at one point, I'm standing right in the center where he would be on the main stage, but he was out on the runway, you know, that center runway that goes down to the middle of the crowd on the floor. He's out there singing and dancing, and he comes back and he's like walking right towards me, singing as I'm shooting, thinking, man, there's
like a model shoot.
It's like the coolest place to shoot Steven Tyler with the crowd and the lights, and he's singing, and he comes up and he starts singing right into my camera, right into my lens, and I'm shooting still. And I know there's video of that. They film everything. So there's some cool video of that somewhere. We're looking for it. And then he decides to show me the inside of his mouth. I think I showed these in the slideshow. So he opens his mouth and sticks my lens in his mouth. I'm still shooting.
It's big enough to cover a lens, right?
He's got his full mouth in my camera. And you can see all his teeth and the inside of his mouth. It's a great photo. And then he decides to clean my lens. So he gives me one of these, takes his scarf and he wipes the lens. It was great.
That's fantastic.
Great. And I'm thinking, man, I'm on stage performing, really, as a rock photographer. That was my role.
You're in your role doing what you're supposed to do while he's doing his role, and you're interacting,
so much
playing off each other.
So much fun.
Oh, that's incredible.
So much fun. I'm like living a movie right there. I'm all of a sudden, I'm in an Aerosmith video. It was cool as heck.
That's incredible. You also said that Keith Richards was super cool.
He's awesome. Really great. Such a nice guy. Like a really exactly how you would want him to be, you know, like a proper British gentleman, you know. Hello, Rob. How you doing? How's Ringo? When Keith Richards asks me how Ringo's doing, it just blows my mind.
You're the connector.
Yeah, really, really great. Really fun. Well, I first met Keith at a birthday party for Ringo in New York City. I'd photographed Stones and Keith before, but I never one-on-one really met him. So that night, when he walked in, and Paul McCartney was there, Joe Walsh, Ringo, little Steven from Bruce Springsteen's band, Billy Squier was there, Edgar Winter. I mean, you look around, like every rock star in New York was at Ringo's birthday party. But when Keith Richards walked in, I mean, everyone in the room, like, oh my God, Keith Richards just walked in.
Yeah.
And it was fun seeing Paul and Ringo go running over to Keith.
Him, right.
Like, Keith, you made it. All right. And they were hanging, the three of them. And, you know, I immediately went over. I'm not shy. I'm over there. You know, the three of them were like hugging and, you know, had their hands on each other's shoulders and talking about this and that. Yeah. And
they go back a little bit.
Yeah. Imagine the history of those two.
I can't even imagine. That's a long time that they were playing in the same circles, doing the same thing.
That's what gets me.
Styles.
That's what really excites me when I think about the history of those guys and what they've done. And for me to be a part of that now and capturing those moments is just great.
It comes back to the mastery of craft, right?
Yeah.
So you work really hard at your game, and therefore you get to be part of the big players' game, right? And you get to help them as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a little bit of the new school. So you've bridged the topic a little bit when you talked about film to digital, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we're going back from address books in your pocket to social media today, right? So things have changed quite a bit from the days when you were getting gigs and booking gigs with a notepad and a payphone to where you're at today. So what's some of the new tools you're using today? You and I spoke about the fact that you have a social media marketing guy and that you're definitely embracing the new school here. You've got a media engine, you've got books, you're working on a documentary. So talk to me a little bit about how you've bridged the new school and what some of the new techniques you're using today.
Well, let me back up. As soon as the digital cameras came out and I started seeing the technology, I jumped in. And there was a handful of photographers, my contemporaries, that were convinced it was a fad and it was never going to go completely 100% digital.
And that no digital photo ever is going to look like a film photo, right?
You'll never get that look on film. And I'm like, don't worry, they will. And come on, you better jump on. And I dived in right away. And, a couple of my friends, they didn't. They dug in their heels and shooting film, and they kind of got lost in the sauce. And I just always wanted to stay on top of the technology. That's why every couple of years I'm upgrading my gear, my cameras. Although my lighting gear is old, I love old lights because they're metal and durable and they're not plastic and they last forever. But I jumped into digital, and when Photoshop came out, dived right in. I knew.
You learned the new technology. You learned how to use the computer.
Photoshop 1, I was in. And it was a perfect time for me. It was, I was mid-20s. So it was like the perfect time for me to really dive in and learn. And, Photoshop is one of those things you learn by just doing. And I found all these great techniques to make my photos better. Was really excited about that because I've always enjoyed seeing how a retouched photo or a photo that's been scanned and then applied with digital effects. That's always intrigued me. So to be able to take my original digital images into a computer and be able to retouch them myself,
right,
or fix this or take out the background or whatever it may be, I was hooked.
But you still had the artist's view of the old school, right? So when you look at composition, you look at the background, you look at the lighting and things of that nature, you have to have that old thought process of how you're going to create a great photo.
Yeah.
And a digital technique is not really a hack to fix all of that.
It wasn't a hack tool for me. It can be for some. It can be a crutch. Like, oh my God, it's horrible. It's a bad image, but I can make it look good in Photoshop. For me, it's taking a great image and just polishing it up, Little subtle things that I do that makes a photo that much better, whether it be, going into the levels or the curves and punching up the contrast or whatever it may be.
Yeah. So how has it changed? How has the new school changed for you today with marketing? How do you get new gigs? How do you find new folks? How do you use social media?
Well, the music industry, pretty small. My name gets bounced around and, your reputation is everything. As you know, that's all we have in this world is our history and our reputation. So I've always kept that in mind, and I've always treated my clients and my people, my artists, like my customers. They're my gold, my people. So I've always had good relationships in the music industry and, just keep pumping out good work and hopefully the phone keeps ringing, you know. I don't do much marketing other than a website and my blog or my Facebook and digital, my social network. And my guy, you mentioned earlier, Jonathan Pushkar, a great, great social guy. He and I have been pals for 6, 7, 8 years. Back when he was a young teenager, he, he's a drummer like me, and his father's a great portrait photographer in Pennsylvania. And we had a lot in common, and he's a huge Beatles fan. And
oh, wow.
he found a way to keep in contact with me. He was aggressive and kept calling and emailing and reaching out to me, and reminded me a lot of myself when I was that age. I was hungry to grow and learn and latch on to people that I thought, were successful and that I really wanted to emulate and follow. And this kid and I formed a really unique friendship, and now he's, my social guy. He went to Belmont University in Nashville, and he's just a terrific guy. And he's at that age where he doesn't know a world without social media, without the internet.
Right.
And he's got it down. So he knows my business better than I do. He knows my world, my social network, and all that way better than I do. He does my Facebook, my Instagram. I'll write it out. He'll post, correct it, or whatever, offer suggestions.
So how often do you Instagram? You Instagram every day, a couple times a day?
At least, yeah. Try to.
Right.
It gets hard. It's a lot of work
to
really, to stay on top of it. He's constantly bugging me for new content.
And then at times it feels pretentious, almost like you're posting to the world what you're doing right now.
That's where it's tricky. I want to not be the guy Instagramming, hey, aren't I cool? I'm in New York at so-and-so restaurant or whatever shooting. To me, I keep it as humble and exciting as I feel like it is to me. Like, man, I can't believe I'm in New York with Juilliard. That's exciting to me. And I want that excitement to come across.
Yeah.
And just share with people a window into my work and my life.
But if you lose track of that thought, you can come off pretentious. I'm not saying Rob Shanahan can, because I've never had anything that's felt ungenuine, unhumble.
I just keep it genuine and humble and real, and just little blurbs on what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's
great. And hopefully it comes across as the way I mean it.
You use LinkedIn as a tool as well.
Yes.
And so you post on LinkedIn new projects, like you posted your Juilliard.
Just did a nice post last night.
Yep.
Yeah, I love LinkedIn, especially with the keynote. With my photography, it seems like the website is better.
Sure.
And, I have all my images up on my website, robshanahan.com, by the way, if you want to go see them. And you can go and see an online portfolio, and you can get what my work is all about. LinkedIn with the keynote is great because I'm connecting with all sorts of different businesses and meeting all sorts of different folks. And, all the CenturyLink folks were immediately on LinkedIn talking about the keynote, and that just opened the floodgates. So.
Yeah. And I'm certain we're going to see a lot more of that. That's something that I've talked to the CenturyLink folks, just to use them as an example. Last week, I was actually at an event that they had with their marketing team, same folks who booked you in the marketing event that they had.
Yep.
And we had a guy named Rob Blaze, who's a top chef, all-star graduate. And he put on what I didn't expect, which was a show, essentially. He cooked in front of everyone. Nice. But it was a comedy show. It was a comedy routine of him going through and doing a little shtick on his cooking experience. And
I love it.
Yeah, we cooked, and he showed us how to cook, and we had a good meal. But it was way more about the experience of that 30 minutes of him cooking and how funny he was. He's a New Yorker, and he tied in his book. And he tied in his podcast.
Rob Blaze.
I'm
going to check him out.
Yeah. And
I love New Yorkers, by the way.
We spoke about the media behind it, right? How do you get that? So do you have an agent? Do you work with people that book you?
When my book came out, volume 1, I hired a publicist who was really good, got me on like every talk show here to New York. I did a bunch of, medium market, smaller market cities across the country, did Boston, New York, Minneapolis, Chicago, LA, Seattle. It just so happened when my book came out, I was on tour at Ringo, so that helped. So I was in a lot of different cities.
Awesome.
And, when you make the call, hey, I got Ringo's photographer wants to come promote his book. So it did open a lot of doors. So that was great. But back then, that's 7 years ago. Yeah, almost 7 years ago. I remember doing the radio and TV, and they would ask me about so and so artist or this photo or that photo, And that's really what started the whole talking about the images. I found out that was, a lot of fun talking about, like Paul and Ringo backstage and all that. So that's really what started the whole speaking about the images mentality. And then, this old neighbor of mine who kept telling me, you should have a camera crew following you around at all times, because what you're doing and that content and that lifestyle is really your gold. That's what you should be marketing. And so that's what we're doing. We're kind of going in that direction with the keynoting, and we're working on the documentary.
Yep. Tell us about that if you can.
Yeah. Next year it'll be released. We're still working on it. It's a work in progress, but, like volume 1, when I agreed to do 1, I let my publisher know I'm not going to rush it out. I'll let it go out when I feel it's 100% and as tight and as good as it can be at the moment. And I feel the same way about the film. I'm going to, we want to keep on working it. And
I'm a documentary junkie. A lot of my friends and I are. We watched all the Netflix docs that are out.
Good.
I think it's becoming one of the more tried and true arts that are out there. There's people that are putting a lot of work into these documentaries, especially some of the crime ones are really good.
Oh, I love
some of those crime ones.
I love them. I'm hooked.
But
there's no crime in mine.
None. But what is it like having a film crew follow you around?
I love it.
You love it.
I dig it. It's so much fun. And I'll tell you how I got involved in this documentary. It's a sweet story. I mean, you like stories. This is a good one. So my alma mater, Minnesota State, Mankato, invited me back, come do a lecture for the students. And I'm in a big lecture hall with the kids. And we're talking about, my leaving Mankato and going to LA and blah, blah, blah. Just a really fun event. And I was honored that my school had me come back. And then that night they had a party at a film production office building headquarters. They had the local entertainment reporter came in and we did a Q&A and I did a slideshow.
Hometown guy, Rob Shanahan.
Yeah, same, that kind of thing. And I met the director and the producer of that film company, True Facade Pictures. And, those guys immediately, with me, we're all Minnesota boys, that we immediately locked in. And those guys are like, dude, we've been on your website. We know all about you now. Why hasn't anyone done a documentary on you? Like, small town Minnesota boy, does good kind of story. And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, well, we want to do it. We're filmmakers. We'd love to do it. So we made a plan that night, because I had 2 more days in Minnesota. They were going to follow me around in Minnesota. So we went back to my hometown, to my house where I grew up, my bedroom where my drum kit was. I know the owners of the house now. They let us in. We went to my high school. I'd made prior arrangements and met my old band director there. Wow. And I sat in with the current high school band and played drums with them.
It's just like one of the football documentaries or one of the, you know, the coming home to
football life.
Right.
Yeah, those exactly. are fun. It was really, really fun. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And, they shoot a lot like I do in certain situations, just kind of flying the wall, capturing the moments and, not in my face.
They're watching you do what you're doing as you're doing it, and they're documenting it, and that's awesome. And then they get to play with all the editing and move it around and put music to it.
Yeah.
And cut out all the boring parts and keep all the...
So what happened was I get back to LA, kind of thought that was fun. We'll see what happens, see what they come up with. And, months go by, and every 3-4 weeks I get a call from Ryan, the director, Ryan Sturgis, and producer Michael Shalhoub. They'd call and say, dude, we're just so amazed at the footage and we're so excited to put something together for you. Stay tuned, right? Like 2-4 weeks go by and they'd call again. We're still working on it. Hang tight. We got something really exciting to send you. And then I get the call from Ryan. Hey, Rob, we're going to be in LA. We have a meeting. Can we see you while we're there? And I'm like, yeah, of course. So 10 days later, they show up at my door, and turns out they didn't have a meeting in LA. I was their meeting. They were coming to pitch the idea of doing the doc and making this a real deal. And they showed up at my door looking like the Blues Brothers, full suits, white shirts, hats. I'm telling you, it's like something out of a movie in itself. sunburned because they had a BMW convertible with the top down, driving across the desert for a couple of days. And it was so funny. It's such a visual I'll always have in my head. Anyway, they come in, meet my wife, and we sit down on my couch. They put it on the table and open it up, hit play. And, you know, this thing unfolds, this little documentary that they created. And that was just 2 days in Minnesota. And all of a sudden, this beautiful little flower opens up on the screen, and it's got sweet music. And they had a drone come into my hometown, and they flew up over the water tower and over the town. And
oh, wow.
And it's just like this real amazing little, like, oh my God, that's my town.
Yeah.
And it was a sweet story. And 10 seconds into it, my no BS New Yorker wife, she grabs my leg and gives me a little squeeze. And I knew she was like,
she could feel it.
Yeah. She's like, all right, these guys got something here. So they just flat out said, we are convinced we have to do this story. We're hooked and we're going to make it happen. We'll get the funding. We'll produce. We'll do all that. You just do what you do and let us into your world. And how could I say no?
Yeah.
And that was 2 years ago, and we've been working.
It takes a while.
It's unbelievable how much work. You know, photo shoots I shoot, and you know, I upload the photos to my client, or they go to where they need to be, and then I'm off to the next thing, a film. It's a whole different thing. And you know, those guys, I'm totally convinced that I have the right guys, and they're doing an amazing job. And, you know, I'll give them a day's notice, 2 days notice. Hey, I'm going to Houston to shoot James Taylor. Can you come? They're like, dude, yeah. They'll book a flight and meet me in Texas because they're still in Minnesota.
Yeah.
They're still in, you know, my home state. And I'll, you know, be in Chicago. They'll take a drive and come meet me in Chicago to film, or, you know, Nashville. Whenever I go shoot there, they jump on a plane and rent the Airbnb, and, you know, they're spending some dough putting this together. And
they obviously see something in it, right? That's going to work out for them. I'm sure it's going to work out for you for sure.
Yeah.
But at a whole nother level, how beautiful is it that you actually get an opportunity to have a work of art document what you do as a person, right?
I love it.
And have it something documented for eternity, right? That's what you did, and your passion and your art and your craft and who you get to meet with and work with. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think I want to get across to people that it's more to me than just, hey, look at me, I'm a big star up on the big screen in the theater, dig me, or I'm on Netflix. You know, I don't want it to be about that. I want it to be about, here was my journey, and I was brave enough, I guess you could say stupid enough, to leave my comfort zone of my hometown and everything I knew. I was brave enough to make that journey and to take that chance. And
you took the left turn.
Follow my dreams. And here, watch it on screen. It's a fun story if you're into it. If you're into rock and roll and seeing behind the scenes photo shoots of Aerosmith and all these great artists, I think you're going to really dig it.
Yeah. But what I see, knowing you, is a master of his craft. Somebody who worked hard to learn. Somebody who worked hard to read manuals, somebody who worked hard in a dark room to try and figure out the right lighting and the right scenario, somebody who doesn't waste people's time with, hey, don't you know who I am? You should be grateful I'm taking a photo of you. You come into the situation respecting their time and trying to bring your A game to a situation.
Yeah. Well, here's an example. So there's musicians out there that are known as studio guys. They'll come in and lay down a drum track. You know, after hearing the song maybe twice, 3 times, they're like, okay, let's go. They'll sit down, put on the headphones, they'll click off, and they just lay down the most sweet, amazing drum track that takes that song and elevates it up here, just brings it up. And I see that. I've seen it happen, whether it be a drummer, a guitar player, or whoever. Artists will come in and do it. I'm like, that's why that guy is a studio guy, because he comes in just on his A game and just freaking nails it. And to see that firsthand, and to think that people think that about me when I come into a situation and do that, that just gives me goosebumps. That's what I want it to be.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
It sure comes off that way. It sure comes off. So how exciting. When's Volume 2 coming out?
Well, we're going to do volume 2 and the movie at the same time because here's the deal. When I do the book,
you're going to get a bump and press with both of them, right?
The book launch, volume 2, will be filmed. And then that's going to be the tail end
of the documentary.
Of the doc. And
I get it.
So the making of volume 2 is actually like the last third of the film. Okay. That's why we're still working on it, because I'm still, actively shooting artists for volume 2.
Can you tease us with some of the artists you're working on in volume 2? I mean, I saw a picture of Lady Gaga. Yep. Who else? Give us a few.
Wait, that's all you need to say right there. Lady Gaga. I mean, come on. I went to Barcelona, Spain, and saw the most amazing Lady Gaga performance. Amazing. That was a great show. A true artist.
She is. Tremendous. She works really hard at her craft, right?
Tremendous. And that new movie she's got coming out, A Star is Born, with Bradley Cooper. Yep. I've been reading the reviews and the stories behind the making of. And, when you really learn about her history, and she says it right there. I was lugging my keyboard around New York, booking my own gigs. I would get on the phone and pretend I was my own manager, and I was working my ass off, and I knew I was going to make it. It was just a matter of when. And I just kept performing and working on my songwriting and my craft. And I'm like, that's it. That's what it takes.
Yeah.
For any of us who wants to, get into that A game. So the film, So here, my Aerosmith stuff and more Stones and, more Ringo and more this and that and all these great artists that didn't make it into volume 1.
They're going to be in volume 2.
Yeah, lots been going on for 6 years since.
That's fantastic. And the speaking gigs. I can't wait to try and make some introductions and get some of those going for you, because it was so fascinating to me to see that.
Thank you.
I see them all the time. And I'm telling you, the last one I saw was just a testament to how great yours was, because it was a research scientist who was talking about some stages of the sail, and he had all of this anecdotal periodic evidence of things. It was just dry and boring, and he was there to sell a book. And Cheers. So it was nowhere near as interesting and fascinating as the stories that you have. So
he's there to sell a book. I go to sell a lifestyle. I'm selling my lifestyle. Yep. Really.
You're telling stories. You're relating stories back to what you do, and everybody finds those very interesting.
I'm sharing 30 years of experiences in the world of, my photography.
Yeah.
That's the fun part, because it comes from here and it's all here in my head. I don't have to write the script. It's been done. I know I just don't know the ending yet.
Yep. Well, I can't wait to find out and see it. And I can't wait to see the documentary and the book. And Rob, much success to you. So grateful for the time we had here today.
Thanks.
And I'm
it went fast. See, I told you.
It did.
It goes by so fast.
When you launch the book, I'll have you back on, and we'll talk to the folks about what's new going on.
V2. I'm so excited about the forward, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm not telling anyone yet. It's just so great.
Awesome.
So exciting.
Well, Rob Shanahan, thanks for being on the Boardroom Sessions.
Thank you, Mike.
We appreciate it.
Hey,
Thank
Mike
you.
here. Hope you liked this Boardroom session. Please check back to your future sessions, as we're recording a new one every month. If you want to reach out, look for me on LinkedIn or send me a note at mike@sidepath.com. That's Mike at sidepath.com.